Hey everyone, the Instant Camera Guy here. I am incredibly busy at the moment. I'm still getting through your orders that I took on in late August. I'm about halfway through and yeah, just slowly slogging through them. I thought that I would post this video on quite an interesting restoration. Took me quite a long time to get this camera working again for reasons that you'll see soon. To anyone that I am currently repairing their camera, note that I am still slogging away at them, taking my time. I will try and get as many people their camera as possible before Christmas, but I can't make any guarantees. Just know that I am diligently working away at this pile as best as I possibly can. Enjoy the video. Hello everyone, the Instant Camera Guy here, and welcome to a video that is going to go back to the roots of this channel. A good old-fashioned repair video. And today's candidate is this SX-70 sonar. Now, I'll go into the history of this camera in just a little bit, but before I launch into gutting this thing, repairing it, and fully overhauling it, I wanted to just say that I always appreciate anyone that likes and subscribes to the channel. If this content is something that you enjoy, and if you like the fact that all of this repair information is being put out into the public for future generations to basically learn about and receive, then feel free to chuck us a donation down below. If you're not aware, this is my full-time job. I repair these cameras day in, day out, as my main source of income. It's what pays the bills and keeps my lights on and supports, my family. So yeah, always appreciated. Now, this particular camera that you see here, the condition that it's in is how I received it. It was already de-skinned when I got it. My understanding is that this camera has been de-skinned for quite a while, and the person that was using it, I believe, was using it de-skinned, just completely naked. Being a Model 2 sonar, this would have originally had the crumbling sort of black or brown leatherette on it, which turns into dust over time because it's a cheap synthetic leather. And so this camera would have been de-skinned because of that failing leather. And this camera, I didn't really know what to expect when I got it. The only thing that was briefly mentioned in a discussion to me is that it stopped working after it got splashed by a wave at the ocean. So I believe that this happened in San Diego, California, in the USA. And yeah, when I started investigating this client's cameras, because he sent 3 of them at a time, the first thing I noticed was, just how hard this thing was to open. And the second thing I noticed was rust. Now that is never a good sign. When these things are physically hard to erect, and you are seeing rust straight away through the side of the body panels, you know that you are in for a bad time. So, the other thing that stands out, and it might be a little harder to see on the camera, is that there is sand everywhere. There is also a grain of rice inside the strap lug here. So I am under the impression that this didn't get so much splashed by a wave as it did utterly dunked. And the client has attempted to fix it by using the old bag of rice trick. On that note, as far as I'm aware, the bag of rice trick really does nothing. Like, the rice doesn't absorb any extra liquid. It's just the act of it sitting around doing nothing that evaporates the water. So a better technique, if you have submerged something in water, some kind of electronic device, is to power it all off and just sit it somewhere warm for like 24 hours, 48 hours, like over a radiator, or, if you live somewhere hot, put it outside in 30 degrees Celsius, 40 degrees Celsius sun. The water will eventually evaporate, and then you can try it. The rice, I believe, is a bit of an old wives' tale. It's a bit of an urban legend. I don't think it actually does anything except get rice into nooks and crannies. So let's just remove that little piece of rice. It's just a waste of rice. But yeah, this thing is in a very, very sorry state. So when I probed, I said, look, okay, this did not just get splashed by a wave. What's the history here? So apparently the client was taking photos of a model at the beach in San Diego, and what they didn't realize is that where this particular patch of coast was, like along some cliffs, every now and again, huge waves crash up onto the shore. And what happened is, yeah, the guy shooting got completely drenched, so did the model. Luckily, none of them were swept out to sea. But to quote my client, he could feel the camera die in his hands. So I'm then going to guess that what happened is he took it home, put it in a bag of rice, and it hasn't worked since. So I tried a pack of film in here and absolutely nothing happens. So today we're going to be trying to figure out why, and also just trying to figure out if this camera is salvageable at all. Because I'm going to go into a bit of a bit of a description as to what salt water and sand and stuff does to an SX-70s, and spoiler alert, it's not good. But before I dive into the camera, I just wanted to reiterate, in case it wasn't clear already, this is something that as an Australian, when you grow up in Australia, you grow up in a country that is rather hostile and dangerous in terms of its natural environment. We have a lot of very dangerous coast, we have a lot of very uninhabitable desert spaces, we have, you know, huge swaths of forest with lots of venomous creatures and spiders and snakes. And I think as an Australian, you learn at a very young age that the Australian nature has to be respected, especially the coast, where, you know, people get eaten by sharks and crocodiles, or just swept out to sea in rips. Basically ocean currents that, you know, you will swim into, and whoop, all of a sudden you're in the middle of the Indian Ocean. And if you are going to be taking photos at a beach or at cliffs, I know this obviously sounds, you know, this is obvious in hindsight, but please do your research. At the very least, watch what the ocean is doing for a good 10-15 minutes before you decide to venture down there. Because you can die. Like to put a serious tone here, just at the start of the video of this otherwise, you know, lighthearted repair video, you could have been killed. Like, this is something like all a wave has to do is knock you off your feet, your head hits a rock, and you are unconscious, and you are underwater with no signs of life. You can and will die. So yeah, just let that be a lesson to anyone planning something like that in the future. Obviously, this was the best case scenario, only a camera got killed. But yeah, human life is not worth the cost of a photograph. So anyway, another important lesson that I'm going to drive home here: do not take your SX-70 to the beach. Do not take any kind of Polaroid camera to the beach. Beaches are one of the most hostile environments for instant cameras. Instant cameras have lots of gears, lots of complicated electronics, shutter blades, rollers, etc. And sand can and will get into every single nook and cranny, and it can and will brick the camera. A few weeks ago, I received a camera back under warranty from a client of mine because they received it and it just didn't work. I put my Polar battery mod on and I put batteries in, closed the door, nothing happened. Hit the button, the shutter would close, nothing. Turned out that the reason that his camera had failed was a single grain of sand got into the gear train where the motor met the gears, and it was positioned in such a way that as the cogs were meshing together, right, this grain of sand was just like there, and it just didn't let the cogs mesh. And so the motor couldn't get up to speed and build up enough torque to actually start. So a single grain of sand completely took down my client's camera and resulted in a warranty job. I'd never seen anything like it. This camera is riddled with sand. I've never seen so much sand in a camera before. Everything is like just covered in microscopic sand. So yeah, this would have been drenched not just by water, but the thing you have to realize is when a wave comes from the ocean, it dredges up a lot of fine sand from the bottom of the ocean. So anything that gets hit is not just hit with water, it's hit by salt water, and it's hit with salt water containing sediment. And those are basically the worst combination of things to ever happen to a camera. The reason that salt water is so bad is salt water acts as a rapid oxidizing agent, so everything basically becomes oxidized. If this ever happens, letting it sit there with the salt water is going to destroy everything regardless. You cannot save it. The only thing that would have prevented this rust would have been to actually get this camera home and completely submerge it in a kitchen sink and just completely saturate it with water. Genuinely. And then you could have rebuilt everything. But yeah, pure distilled water would have been the only way to save this. And then you'd have to wait for the camera to completely dry out. You would need to completely take it apart and service it still, but the rust would have been avoidable. So without further ado, I am going to take this thing apart. No, actually, let's test it first. I am going to put a pack of film in. And we're already not at a great sign. So if I press that hinge switch up, there is no signs of life. This is not good, guys. We can even see oxidization on the light dark wheel here. So yeah, a pack of film does nothing. The next thing I can try before I take the camera out is just to unclip the gear train here. And again, this is just revealing so much oxidization. And I'm just gonna, oh dear. Oh, there we go. Okay, I'm just gonna manually cycle the gears a little bit. But yeah, it's not looking good, guys. Everything's completely seized. Like, those gears were so hard to turn. Now, normally, I would just tell a client to throw this away. But one of the reasons that I haven't done a repair video in quite a while is just nothing has come across my bench that's been particularly interesting. Like don't get me wrong, I've seen some cameras in pretty bad shape, and I've repaired a lot of a lot of really bad cameras over the last few months to years. But everything's been kind of like stuff that I've done on the channel before. I've never done anything this dire. So I'm taking this as a personal challenge to get this thing working. So what I'm going to do is just start by removing the screws. I'm going to put a bit of Liberty oil, a bit of penetrating oil on each of these screws, because there is still some glue left from the adhesive. Then I'm just going to use a soldering iron to heat up the screw, basically until the oil is bubbling. What the soldering iron does is it just heats up the screw and hopefully will break any just any rust or oxidization that might be bonding it together, because I get the feeling these screws are going to be hard to remove. Now, of course, if push comes to shove, I can drill out or use a Dremel to remove these screws, but I would rather not have to. So if we can spend just a few little minutes trying to loosen them before we attempt to remove them, it's going to save a lot of time. There we go. So I'm just putting these off to the side. There is a little bit of rust on these screws, but they are all coming off pretty nicely after being heated up. If you go to use one of these screwdrivers without doing that prep work, because Robertson heads are just not a good design, like there's a reason that square-headed screws are not very commonly used, unless they're on a larger scale with high tensile bolts or screws. Odds are that the high tensile screwdriver bit will just round that square aluminium head into a complete circle, and you'll have to then drill out and remove the screws. So let's open this up. First of all, sand. Look at that. It's filthy in here, absolutely filthy. So I'm putting that to the side, and here we get our first look at the state of things. And it is pretty darn sorry. This motor, I think, is completely toast. And the shutter, honestly, doesn't look too badly affected. It's like the waves hit most of the body and the water got into the body. Miraculously, there's no signs that water got into the lens, the transducer, or anything like that. So I think what I'm going to do is, at the very least, separate, if I can. There we go. Just separate the body from the shutter, and we'll put the shutter to the side. Because truthfully, I think we'll be able to salvage this shutter pretty easily, but the body, I am completely unconvinced. We may end up needing like a lot of spare parts. I'm just going to poke the bellows out of the way and again just try and heat up this screw. One of the issues that's happening here is the screw has literally rusted to the body panel, like to the lens board. There is so much oxidization. I might actually just get a bit of penetrating oil on them as well. Just see if I can't loosen the grip of that rust. Now, failing this, we can Dremel these screws out. We can still attempt to salvage things, but if I do that, I'm going to have to take the viewfinder off to get access to the screws. I like to just come in from the side because it's easier. But yeah, we'll see if that helped. It might not. Ah, there we go. See, good old penetrating oil. Usually it's very uncommon to have to use oil on the lens board, but in this case, it's just so rusty. All right. So, yeah, like this looks, the shutter looks good. I can't believe that the shutter is not like completely destroyed. That's almost like really bizarre. All right. Since this is in pretty good nick, I'm going to put it off to the side. At the very least, if this proves completely uneconomically feasible to salvage, we at least have a good quality shutter. But boy, is this thing in a sorry state. First thing I'm going to do, I'm just going to use a painter's brush to literally just brush so much sand off of this thing, which is now going all over my bench because I'm trying to do it on camera. All right, now I have to clean my bench, which is now like the beach. Oh, this is so disgusting. All right, well, that's a little bit cleaner. Next thing I'm gonna do is I'll probably just take the tongue out because I plan on like I-type. Well, we might I-type convert this thing later, but at the very least, it's good to have an option. So I just take the tongue out. That tongue prevents inserting packs of I-type film. So I always get rid of them. Even if I'm not doing an I-type conversion on a client's camera, I will always get rid of the tongue and just file down the little lugs. Because if the client does want it converted into I-type in the future, it's just going to make my life a lot easier. And I'm just doing it now because I need to file down the little lugs on the inside, and since I'm going to be cleaning this thing from the inside out, getting metal filings in there now doesn't really matter. So next thing I'm going to do is just punch out more of the hinge pins and just start separating some of the body panels. Now luckily this camera is made of plastic predominantly, so the actual body panels and things are in pretty good nick, because obviously plastic doesn't corrode like steel does. You can just see so much sand. I bet you there's going to be sand on the Fresnel screen too. Okay. Get the viewfinder off. And yeah, again, there's just sand stuck to everything on the inside. Otherwise, not too bad. Yeah, it's like the water really got into the bottom of the chassis predominantly. It's like the wave came and water splashed in from the sides and sort of filled up the bottom. All right. Next thing I'm going to do is take the rear hinge pins out and I'm just going to get a little plastic baggie to put some of these parts in that I'm taking out so I don't lose everything. But yeah, this thing is quite the mess. And then we'll take out the bellows screws. Slide that out the side. This erection arm I will likely replace because it's really rusty. I might be able to salvage it, but I might just have to replace it because the hinge at the top has really rusted, and even after lubricating that, I just don't think that spring mechanism is ever really going to work as well as it did before. But who knows, I might be able to fix it. My goal here is to try and keep as much of the camera original as possible. All right, now let's just check the mirror. Amazingly, the mirror is quite secure, which is great to see. What I might end up doing is cutting the silicone out of this and releasing the mirror anyway, and then re-gluing it back in just so I can get under there and clean out any sand that is likely hiding behind that mirror, because if that sand then becomes dislodged and goes onto the Fresnel screen, it can cause scratches and things, so that isn't something that we want. Now let's see what the inside is like. Woo. So there is actually a lot of corrosion on the battery terminals, like quite a lot. And there is quite a lot of corrosion on the rear hinge switch. So I think what I'm going to do, I'm going to lower the mirror, and I think I'm going to remove the Fresnel completely. I'm going to attempt to remove the mirror in one piece. Hopefully I can cut into it. Cool. All right. And I'm now just going to, remove the Fresnel screen, because it's in pretty decent condition and I don't want to scratch it or break it or anything like that. Okay. Now, in terms of the rust on the body here, there isn't really a lot I can do. Like all of these rust patches that are on the side of the erection arm here that are causing that erection arm to be so stiff, this metal is like a raw finish. And so it does oxidize if it gets wet. I can't really paint this section because friction like the sliding arm is a source of friction. So if I paint it, any paint is just going to slough off and go into the taking mirror and the Fresnel assembly, and that's going to leave specks all over either your photo or in the viewfinder. So I can't do that. But what I can do is gently sand this back using some wet and dry sandpaper. And before I reassemble this camera, I will grease and oil all the parts of the chassis, and the oil is going to form a barrier so that that oxidization hopefully doesn't come back. And that's really the best that I'll be able to do. So I'm just taking off the springs from the Fresnel assembly. There we go. Now we can lift out and liberate the Fresnel, which, other than a few grains of sand on it, miraculously, it's not in bad shape. However, the little film counter actuator, the little arm here that activates the film counter, is very stiff and very stuck. Like, this part is supposed to be spring-loaded and it barely moves. So I'm just going to see if I can use some contact cleaner just to, there we go, just to loosen things up. Like everything just really needs a flush. Basically, any moving part on this SX-70 will need to be lubricated. And lubricated thoroughly. Because we need to get things working and free everything up that's become stuck. And we need to make sure that it doesn't seize up again. So quite literally, every single part is going to need to be relubricated. But that part is moving nicely now. This part, what this part does is when the Fresnel screen goes up and down, this little lever here pushes on the film counter wheel and basically moves the next number along. So the film counter counts each time the mirror goes up and down. That's how it works. And if that spring-loaded bit becomes jammed like it was, it will not work. But that's looking pretty good. This will be able to be cleaned up. I'm nice and happy that this did not oxidize, because if this oxidized, we'd be in a lot of trouble. All right. Now, I think what I'm going to do is I'm probably going to desolder this ribbon cable, because there's a lot of rust underneath that I'm going to want to treat. Like, I really want to treat this entire chassis as best as I possibly can. So I'm probably going to get some wick, get some solder. I've got my soldering iron here, and I'm going to try and remove every part of this ribbon cable and just completely remove it from the body of the camera. Yeah. Yeah, I'm going to do that. Now, when we were testing it before, we were not able to get any signs of life out of the motor. And I don't know why. It could be that the motor is completely seized, or it could be that the water has damaged the driver chip. So when we reassemble this thing, I may end up needing to replace the driver chip. I will certainly be replacing the motor, because this thing is, like, look how oxidized that is. It's just completely white. But I might need to replace the driver chip as well, because there's a little silicon chip right here in the ribbon that basically tells the motor when to turn on and off. And if it blows because, you know, maybe it got wet from seawater, well, it might need completely replacing. But I'm hoping that it's fine. A lot of the solder on this has oxidized because of the salt water, so removing it is a bit of a mission. But patience is going to be your best friend here. Now, as for the film counter, the spring does still work on that. I don't know if I'll be able to successfully desolder the ribbon from the counter without breaking the traces on the counter. But since this camera is going to be upgraded to an SX-70 RPCB, that doesn't really matter because the RPCB completely ignores the switches on the film counter. So even if I can't get this thing off safely, it's not gonna bother us. Trying to desolder as much of this as I can. All right, that's 2 switches down. Let's go for the big positive connection that's in the center. Nearly there. Nearly there, just a little bit more. There's actually quite a lot of solder on this. There we go. Can I get it around the barb? I can. But you see what I mean? The switch completely came off, which I had a feeling it would because so much heat was required, and honestly there's just, like, you can see the corrosion that's in that switch assembly. Fortunately, it doesn't matter. As I said, when we install a new SX-70 RPCB, the Bluetooth PCB that I use when I fix these cameras, like these here, when I install those, it ignores those switches anyway, so it doesn't really matter. But we're nearly there now. I've just got to do these switches and we can completely remove everything and get a better idea of what it is that we're looking at underneath. And truth is, I probably don't have to remove this ribbon cable because, you know, it all seems to be intact. The insulation is still there. I'm doing this mainly because I really just want to strip this thing down as much as possible and try and rust-proof it. I could just swap the body over. I happen to have a sonar body in stock. But I think this is more interesting. This camera is going to live with its battle scars. It is going to live with that story of trying to be claimed by the ocean. So I want to keep this thing as original as possible because not doing so would be boring. Alright, one last set of switches, and then we should just be able to take everything off. Now this front switch here in the gear train gets completely ignored by the SX-70R PCB, so even if that switch didn't survive, it's not going to matter. In fact, I could put this camera together without ever even reinstalling that switch. Look at that. Yeah, rusty. Oh wow, that's so corroded. Anyway, the driver chip actually looks okay. The motor is certainly not, though. That's seen better days. That we will definitely need to be replacing. There we go. And we will need to keep the drive shaft. We'll be using that a bit later. So I'll put that in the baggie. This motor is completely screwed up. So I'm just going to open it up. And yeah, it's corrosion city in here. I'll take some of the little plastic washers from it, but this motor is toast. It is going straight in the bin at my feet. So, that gives us the chassis to play around with. Everything will need to be cleaned. I am going to just, again, put all the little parts in the bag that I've been taking off the camera. All the crumbling bits. The last thing that I'm going to do is remove this mirror. Now this mirror is fine, right? But because salt water's got under here, I don't know if it's going to continuously oxidize. I don't know if there is sand hiding behind here. I don't know if this is going to cause trouble in the future. So I'm going to snip that little plastic guide off. That's going to allow me to swivel this mirror. And then I'm going to get a craft knife, tilt this, and I'm trying to poke into the silicone. You have to be very careful with this. You basically want to stab the silicone so that it starts to separate. There's a bit of a trick to this. Oh, there we go. We did it. Now the front silicone is too hard to access, but what I did, there are two little plastic guides that help the mirror be positioned in place from the factory. Well, if you snip one of them off, you can lift the mirror and rotate it. Because silicone is very, very strong when it comes to tensile strength. It's very compressible, but it does not have good rotational strength. And yeah, wow, that's salty. So gross. And yeah, there was gunk under here, so I'm glad we got in there. You know, I really don't want any salt remaining on this thing. One thing I'm going to do now, I'm going to use a Dremel and just carve a little bit of the tripod socket, right? So this tripod socket that sits at the bottom, it sits very, very high up, and that can impede your ability to insert I-type packs of film. So, like I said, I don't know if my client wants me to I-type modify this camera, but just in case, I'm going to get my safety glasses, I'm going to get my Dremel, and while I've got this thing open, I'm going to carve the front of it into a bit of a ramp. So we'll remove the lug and then the top part. All right. Okay. So by doing that, I get rid of that high lip, and the little lug that's on the I-type film should now easily slide over that and towards the back. Now, what I'm going to do is basically take this thing apart and wash it in my kitchen sink. And I'm going to use like some sandpaper and some cloths and just try and get rid of as much of this rust as I possibly can. There are some bits that are going to be riveted in. There's not much I can do about that. I'm not going to remove the bellows because the lens board again is riveted in place. But what I'm going to be doing after I've just sort of sanded as much of the rust off as possible, there's no way I can ever get this metal finish back to perfect. But if I can get as much of the oxidization off as possible, I'm going to basically be able to oil the rest of the metal so that that oxidization shouldn't return. And that's going to allow this camera to function as good as it possibly can. So I'm going to literally take this now to the kitchen sink and wash it and scrub it with dish soap and some wet and dry sandpaper to remove it, and then I'm going to dry it, and by the time I turn the camera on again, hopefully this looks a lot cleaner. I may also, yeah, I'll probably get in there and wash out like all the gear train and put that back on as well. But yeah, you guys will see what happens when we come back to it. Actually, you know what? While I'm washing things, I might as well, like, I'll wash a bit of the ribbon cable, and I might as well also attempt to wash the insides of this viewfinder, because this is also really, really grubby. So I'm just going to grab a screwdriver and remove the pins. There we go. And I'm going to completely take this thing apart. Because, yeah, we can see all the sand grains that are in there. Sand here as well. Everything is just stupidly gross. And yeah, this is all going to have a trip in a nice hot soapy bath. So all of these parts will be coming inside along with the base of the camera body and the chassis, and everything's gonna go get a wash. I'll be back.
And now, a compact, folding, electronically controlled, motor-driven, single-lens, reflex camera. And now, a compact, folding, electronically controlled, motor-driven, single-lens, reflex camera.
camera into its erect position. Press and the door opens. Take the 10-picture film pack and push it all the way in. Close the door and automatically the cover sheet will be ejected from the camera.
And now, a compact, folding, electronically controlled, motor-driven, single-lens, reflex camera. And now, a compact, folding, electronically controlled, motor-driven, single-lens, reflex camera.
Now rest the camera against your chin. Bring your eye to the viewing lens. Place your thumb on the back of the lens board and your finger on the focusing wheel. Rolling left or right, bring the scene into sharp focus from infinity down to 10 inches. When the correct moment comes, press the red electric shutter button until the film is out. Holding the camera steady, select, focus, shoot.
And now, a compact, folding, electronically controlled, motor-driven, single-lens reflex camera, capable of focusing from infinity down to 10 inches, developed to exploit integral self-processing film units, which when exposed are automatically ejected from the camera with no parts to peel or discard, and whose final images emerge without timing in daylight, where the viewer can see them materialize within the same transparent, protective plastic cover through which the film was originally exposed. Electronically controlled, motor-driven SX-70, single-lens SX-70, reflex SX-70 camera. And now, SX-70, a compact SX-70, folding SX-70, electronically controlled, motor-driven SX-70, single-lens SX-70, reflex SX-70 camera.
All right. After that little montage, it is now the next day, and as you can see, I have painted the base of the camera matte black. Basically, any parts that are going to sort of like show through or be seen, I've tried to paint over as much of the metal as I possibly could, basically just to reduce oxidization in the future. I just used a little brush and some hobby paint to do this. This is not a part of the camera that will ever get seen. This is going to have plastic body panels protecting it. This is going to have ribbon cables going over the top. But I did it mainly to prevent oxidization from occurring. The inside part of the camera I will be oiling, just using some Liberty oil. Again, just to try and reduce the oxidization. And effectively what I need to do now is re-silicone in the mirror, and then let that dry for 24 hours, and then we can begin reassembling this body. All of the gear train has been lubricated within an inch of its life. And probably one other thing that I will do, just to be on the safe side of things, is on SX-70 Alphas and SX-70 Sonars, the spring for the mirror return, Polaroid changed the design of it. So in early Model 1 cameras, in this little cutout, here on the side panel, there was a second spring. So Polaroid had a primary spring here, and they had a secondary spring, which just served to add some extra oomph to bring the mirror back up. Now, by the time the Alphas and the Sonars came around, Polaroid decided to just ditch the second spring and just use one spring that was stronger, and just do away with having two. They figured, why not just make one really strong spring instead of, relying on two of them? Now, what that actually means is if I find a Model 1 body or chassis, I can add the secondary spring back to this so that not only do we have the really strong sonar spec spring, but we have the spring from a Model 1. Now, the reason that I'm going to do that is the sliding ram here was affected by the oxidization. I have obviously cleaned and lubricated, but I don't want it gumming up in the future, so I'm going to give it that extra tension so that the mirror can come up. That is not normally something that you would need to do, but given this case, and given I have challenged myself to try and rebuild this as good as possible while keeping everything original, that is something that I'll be doing. One thing that I will need to do, though, is replace the rollers. Unfortunately, the salt water has rusted them out. See the corner there? Right? Unfortunately, that rust is pushing up on the rubberized parts, and look, although I could probably clean that, it's likely going to affect the development. There's rust on the sides here as well, so that means that these rollers really have to go. Now, fortunately, I have a set from a SLR 680. So these are the non-rubberized kind. It is 2 metal rollers. You can use SLR 680 rollers on an SX-70 sonar without issues. The only thing you have to watch is you need an SLR 680 ribbon cable. The ribbon cable on a 680 is a slightly different shape, and it has to be because the gear system on SLR 680 rollers is slightly wider. So if we were to use the original shutter ribbon cable, it is too thick and it will grind in the gears. So I will have to replace the side ribbon cable with the slightly different shaped one from the SLR 680, but that's not really a big deal considering I will be replacing the PCB here with the SX-70R model. But that is just something we're going to have to do. The other thing that I will be replacing is this rusty erection arm here. It ain't going to fly. I have one that is in much better condition. There's so much oxidization around the little riveted sliding piece. It's just realistically not going to work properly. And there's no point salvaging it. I probably could, but I've got enough spare parts. It's never going to look the same, so I'm just going to do that now, and then I'm going to focus on those rollers. The rollers I need to clean from the inside out. So while everything's off, I'm just going to pull that out to the side, like so. And we can see just how rusty everything has become. Like, look at the top there. That is just completely brown with rust and oxidization. No good. No good at all. But yeah, I really did contemplate saving the erection arm. I truly did, but I just decided it's one part I'll probably just have to replace. So I'm just cleaning underneath where that erection arm was, and then we can slide the new one on and put the screws in place. Be careful doing this. You don't want to dislodge the springs. You've got to slide this part up and under the bellows, and then there are 2 screw holes. You want to make sure, I'm getting myself some light here, you want to make sure that you've slid it in the correct way. So I like to slide it up until I can see the holes, and just making, you got to make sure all the screw holes line up, basically. I will note this is very fiddly to do in front of my work camera. Usually I would do this sitting on my lap where I can see a lot better. I'm trying to show you guys as best as possible. There we go. Great. And I can put the screws back in place. And just do the other side. And that is going to look and feel much nicer. All right. Looks infinitely better than the old one did. All right. Using the same screwdriver, I'm going to take the rollers out now, and I'm just going to have to throw them away, because unfortunately they are just beyond salvaging. Great. I will have to reuse the little plastic triangle, which I think I will need to, I'll need to modify slightly, because the 680 triangle just has a different shape to allow for movement of this little white plastic part. So I'm just going to get some scissors and just cut that so as to liberate the little spring-loaded tensioner on the rollers. Yeah, like I said, the 680 has a different design in terms of its rollers, so it needs the different little black plastic shield here, and it needs a different ribbon cable on the body. You can use sonar parts to fix 680s, but there are a few small differences in between models that you need to be aware of. Fortunately, most SX-70s, they are pretty modular in the grand scheme of things. So, you know, most of the time you're going to be able to use things and get away with things. Cool. Just have to liberate a little more plastic. I'm going to just do that with a little X-Acto knife. Nearly done. I think I'm just going to have to remove that part too. There we go, so that it fits. I'm also going to clean the inside of the film door here, since it is completely filthy, and once we have the rollers off, that's the best time to do that. Again, so much sand is coming out of this thing. It is just astonishing how well sand gets into every nook and cranny on an SX-70. In case it is not obvious, yeah, do not take them to the beach. Really, like, don't take any camera to the beach. Like, that's why waterproof cameras were invented, right? It's not just to seal them away from the water, but it's to seal them away from the sand. Yeah, you really need, like, weatherproof housings if you're going to do anything near the ocean. Or you just need a disposable camera. That you don't care about. Alright, now I'll I'll clean under the door flap as well. It's just so gummy with old developer gunk. Okay, and now we can just clean the faceplate a bit, which has all saltwater stains on it. This camera will never look like 100% clean ever again, but it's going to get pretty close to its original form. Like, it's going to look like it's seen some stuff, you know what I mean? Alright, I have to take the screws out of this. And we can now put in the SLR 680 rollers. Normally I would use SX-70 rollers, but honestly like the ones I have in stock are pretty lousy, like they're all bad condition. They're all rusty or they don't roll very nicely. These are easily the best rollers I have in stock currently, which is why my client is getting 680 rollers. I mean, like, I do have other rollers at the moment, but they're attached to cameras. I don't really have anything on their own, so to speak. Just making sure nothing is catching. That's all looking good. Flap is working as it should. All right. Let's focus on cleaning up the mirror. The camera's auto exposure mode is probably going to go all kinds of crazy. Just cutting off some of the old silicone that's on there. As you guys will probably remember, the silicone on this camera was actually in good condition. I had to cut it out. But the reason I cut it out was because there's all kinds of like just salt crust and sand that was back here. And I didn't want that getting into the Fresnel assembly after the camera gets jostled around, so that is why I have removed the mirror completely. Normally I would have left that completely in place since it was very, very secure. There was absolutely no way that mirror was going to fall. It was very, very tight and held in place correctly. But because of the nature of this damage with all the water and that kind of stuff, I really wanted to clean it. So I'm glass cleaning it, and I'm going to hit it with some alcohol, and then we are going to silicone it back in place. One of the things I did off camera, by the way, the rear hinge switch that is on the top long panel, I did get down there with a file and clean it out because it was pretty heavily oxidized. And odds are that very little electricity would have been flowing through it if I had just left it. So once this mirror is glued back into place, we can then start work on the shutter assembly. All right, put that down there. One other thing I will do is I will probably clean a little of the battery terminals just because they have some corrosion on them. Normally this is not something that you would need to do because corrosion in the battery terminals is pretty rare. I've done entire videos on that subject. But this camera is a special use case because it was dunked in the ocean. So I'm just getting some of the larger spots of corrosion off. But what I'll probably do is put a cloth in here with some vinegar on it. So I'm actually going to grab like some tissue paper. And I'm going to grab my little bottle of vinegar from outside. And what I'm going to do, the vinegar will just take away some of that corrosion that's in there. So I've put it on a tissue so as to just keep it under control. But yeah, I'm just going to stick it in there like that. And that vinegar will remove any oxidization from those little brass terminals. All right. Now, I've got my Permatex black silicone. I've removed the vast majority of the old silicone, and we are going to re-silicone. So I like to do 3 blobs in the corners, and then 1 in the center as well. And that is just going to hold things a lot more securely. And I'm just going to push some of the silicone around with a Q-tip just to control sort of where it oozes, because I don't want it necessarily oozing outside the limits of the mirror where it's going to make a mess. All right, and we're going to press it back in. Now when you reset the mirror like this, as I said before earlier in the video, there are little plastic guides. There's 2 at the top and then 1 on the side here, and then this side there's nothing. I remove one of the plastic guides in order to get the mirror out as safely as possible without smashing it. But the plastic guides, they don't actually do anything. They're just to help you position the mirror. It's actually the silicone that's going to hold it in place. And by the time that's completely dry, that will be working completely fine. So the mirror will obviously need a good clean because it's currently filthy on this side still, but I need to use my fingers to position it, so it's going to end up with fingerprints on it anyway. So I will clean it once that glue has set, once the silicone is dry. Just making sure that everything looks good. Great. All right, looking set. I'm going to put this off to the side. All right. These rollers, I think I will toss. This rusty thing I'm going to chuck in the bin. And now we can turn attention to the shutter. I mean, I still have the viewfinder and stuff to assemble. That's at the top, but I'll probably do that in a montage since it's not particularly fascinating, and I have shown that before. But I do want to investigate the shutter and see if anything looks bad here. Fortunately, it looks okay. A few little grains of sand have ended up in the transducer, which I'm hoping I can blow out with a leaf blower. I do not know the functioning condition of this thing because I was unable to test it. Although, oh, yeah, that's not good. That is, oh, it's, ugh. Man, sensory. It sounds like grinding sand. Oh my lord, it's probably going to be a mess in here. Let's have a look. I can only hope that the grinding that I'm hearing... Oh, look at that rusty screw here. I bet you when I try and remove this, it's going to take that head straight off. Yeah, so fortunately there's not a lot of oxidization here. Something is definitely stiff and grinding. I don't know whether... It's likely that it's just sand that's gotten into the gears. So I think the best thing that I can do is just completely disassemble this thing. And basically just, yeah, try and clean everything as best as I possibly can. And then pray that the autofocus works. That's going to be the real big clincher. So I'm just removing the screws from the top panel. I will not be reusing those since they aren't necessary. You don't need to screw the housing in place. My goodness, everything's so stiff. Taking one of the screws out that holds the top panel in place. Now let's see if I can separate that. There we go, that just gets the housing off at the rear. And now I want to see if I can just slide the housing the rest of the way. Get the rear off. There we go. There we go. Alright, that piece of plastic's pretty clean. I'll be able to clean that up. The front housing is also really nice. So the good thing is that the front housing did not get damaged at all. None of that spring's rusty. We can put that off to the side. This honestly looks pretty clean in here. I don't know if the opto sensor is damaged. We will soon find out. Fortunately, this is the version of the opto sensor with the matte black epoxy. So if I did have to fix and replace that, it is going to be pretty easy to do. But I'm not going to know if I'll need to do that until I've assembled everything. So we'll save that to the end. Next thing I'm going to have to do is just take off some more screws. I'm going to take the light dark wheel off. This screw, being so rusty, may just snap. If it does, that's going to be annoying. Do you know what? This is like never necessary to put Liberty oil on these screws, but given the condition of them, I'm just going to heat it up with the soldering iron. And we will find out whether or not the head of this screw just completely snaps in my hand. It's coming out. Kinda. Well, it's spinning freely, but it is going to be removed. It didn't snap. This one came out much easier. So that screw bit's fine. This one I can now pull up on the light dark wheel as I release it, and it should. I will be throwing this screw bit in the bin because it's just so rusty. So basically I'm trying to lift up as I undo this screw. It's not easy because of the rust. There we go. All right, the light dark wheel is in good condition, it seems. Yep. It's oh yeah, it's got a bit of rust under the spring. Needs a clean, but we should be able to salvage this. It just needs a good bath in some water because I think salt water and residue has just made it all stick. Yeah, there we go. See, it does want to move. Everything needs a good flush. Yeah, it's freeing up nicely the more I play with it. So we can set it, reset it. Cool. All right, that we can put off to the side. We will be able to save that. I'm now going to take the... Oh. Oh yeah, we've got oxidization of the idler gear. Fantastic. Is it even worth marking this? Not really. I'm just going to take that off. Usually I would put a mark to know where to reset the focusing wheel, but I'm just going to do that by eye afterwards. Usually I do a little cheat sheet way of resetting it, but yeah, that screw is really, really rusty, so I will throw that away. Luckily I've got plenty of those in spares in stock. And I'm just going to continue to take this apart. Here is the flash cam follower assembly, also very rusty. But fortunately, the rust, I believe, has just transferred off of the walking arm, so I will replace the walking arm as well. I've got lots of those in stock, so here's another better condition one. Now what I'm going to do, I'm going to set the cam follower assembly here, this rusty part. I'm just going to press that into that vinegar that I had over to the side. And here is one of the big issues with the grinding, this idler gear. Very, very crunchy. So I'm going to see if I can't take the lens off here from the helicoid, which is probably also filled with sand. Oop, there we go. And yep, that's filled with sand. And yeah, this idler gear I will need to take out, clean that, and put it back after lubricating it. This idler gear, the spring-loaded one, is also in bad condition. So I'm just going to press down on the idler gear and then remove the plastic washer that holds it in place, because that will need to be cleaned out. The brass needs to be cleaned up here. And I will also take the washer off of this idler gear. For this one, it's not spring-loaded, so you kind of need to like lift it up with a knife or a small blade and get some pliers in there like that. And then you can remove the little circular washer. And that idler gear now comes up, and here we can see the Statue of Liberty green of that brass. I will also take out the last screw for the sonar assembly. And then I will take out the little plastic lug that just holds it securely in place. There we go. And now I can desolder all that PCB. Oh, before I do that, I wonder if the solenoid still works. I think the shutter blades are completely stuck together because of probably water tension, and the salt has bound them together. I think this solenoid is going to move. So miraculously, it doesn't seem like any water actually got into the solenoid, which is great for us. Because if I can save that solenoid, that's going to be awesome. If not, I do have some spares sitting to the side of me that I'll be able to make work, but I do want to try and save this without needing to replace everything, if you know what I mean. I want to try and keep this as original as possible, because the entire point here is that this is meant to be a challenge. It's not meant to show people that I want to be doing crazy repairs like this, but that I can if push comes to shove. Here we go. Just going to release the little red warning light. And we'll remove this little daughter board here because this does not get used when we do the SX-70R conversion. So we'll take this off, put that in the bin. And now I should be able to, lift up on that, get the ribbon cable out. There we go. Cool. Yeah, the actual sonar mechanism seems to be in good shape. In fact, it moves really freely. So my hypothesis is definitely that water kind of entered from the bottom of the camera and rised up. That's why the viewfinder was so relatively clean. That's why the sonar mechanism has barely any oxidization or sand or anything. This is honestly the most important part here. It's really the shutter that copped the brunt of things, which is, unfortunate, but it's probably the better part to have been damaged because it's something that I really need to take apart anyway to do the SX-70R conversion. So, it's not like it's really much extra work, given that I'm fully overhauling the camera anyway. The only thing I've really spent a lot of extra time doing, and will be doing, is just lubricating, painting, and deoxidizing that bottom chassis. So we'll take the solenoid out now. And miraculously, this works. In fact, it's got like a good pneumatic tension on it. So this honestly feels like it would just be completely in spec, even if I put the SX-70R PCB in. I will obviously be flushing this out. So I will be removing the little spring-loaded part. I will be completely flushing that out with contact cleaner. I'll probably replace this little copper spring because that's a bit corroded. I'm going to scrape some of that rust transfer off the side there. But yeah, miracle of miracles, this solenoid seems to have survived. I'm just going to, I'll test whether it fires. Yeah. All right, great. Well, all that really needs to be done then is cleaned up, and then that's going to be salvageable. And that means that it's, yeah, it's the blades here that are stuck together, so I'm going to remove them. So I'm going to slide them as gently as I can. There is a little, like a pivoting arm here that contacts the blades. It is removable, you have to lift up from the bottom, but on the Sonar series cameras, any cameras that have a plastic shutter housing, you want to use some kind of like spike or tool to hold down the pin from the top while you pry it up. Because these can get really jammed, and as you lift up on this little arm, it lifts the pin as well, and then you are screwed. There is no coming back from that. And here is the reason that everything was stuck together. Look at that. That is actually still wet. Smells like the ocean. Yeah, wow. So that literally, there was like still ocean water trapped between those blades. How gross. I will also need to test solenoid number 2. Again, it looks really clean. It's not bound up. I'm sure it will still work. So I will just remove the rest of the shutter housing. Sorry, I will remove the PCB from the shutter housing. All right. Now I'm not going to be reusing this PCB, but I will take the ribbon cable from the side. Put that off to the side. And yeah, here we can see just how crusty that electric eye is. Whether or not that oxidization was always there or whether that was because of the ocean, we will never really know. And that leaves me now with this. Now, since there is literally grains of sand in the lens cells, I will probably need to remove this. I'm just thinking because this lens cell is held in place with melted plastic, basically. And I really want to take this entire like assembly over to the sink and rewash it, because it's literally like it feels like salt water. It feels gross. So I'll probably just remove the lens housing as well. And then I will remelt it back in place with a soldering iron. So can I? Yep, there we go. I'll just bust it out. And yeah, I'll need to reset that in place. But yeah, everything is going to need to be completely washed. And I'll just test this. I will test the second solenoid as well, but I think it's going to work. Yeah, so that works fine. Cool. I'm going to head back into the house, into the laundry sink, and I'm going to wash the heck out of this. I will be right back.
In order to understand why now, why a factory of this complexity and automaticity, we have to go back to 1944 to the very first concept of a kind of photography that would become part of the human being, an adjunct to your memory, something that was always with you, so that when you looked at something, you could, in effect, press a button and have a record of it in its accuracy, its intricacy, its beauty. Have that forever. Now that kind of camera implies a whole family of technologies which did not exist in 1944. Obviously, the place to start was in the image itself. The first domain in which we did our work was in making the instantaneous image itself without liquids. The cameras were large but acceptable. They were grand machines for a grand purpose. They were a long way from the dream which I used to talk about then of being able to take a wallet out of my pocket, open the wallet, press a button, close the wallet, and have the picture. In 1944, one would have thought that a camera that would do what the Color Pack 2 does would, if at all conceivable, cost perhaps $100. And yet it is clear that as far as we have come, and as remarkable as that achievement seems to be, we are still a long way from the concept, from the realization of the concept of a camera that would be, like the telephone, something that you use all day long, whenever an occasion arises in which you want to make sure that you cannot trust your memory, or when you want to record any object of great interest to you, or any beautiful scene. A camera which you would use not on the occasion of parties only, or of trips only, or when your grandchildren came to see you, but a camera that you would use as often as your pencil or your eyeglasses.
All right, time to tackle the viewfinder. I have reassembled the shutter. I had to cut out the glass to clean the sand. I'm just waiting on everything to 100% dry before I reassemble this. I did put the idler gears back in place though. They are spinning nice and freely after I cleaned up both of the little brass pieces that they were attached to, those little brass shafts. So those are lubricated, spinning freely. And that means I can now focus on rebuilding the viewfinder assembly. So basically what I'm going to do is just clean the glass as I go. As I said before, the viewfinder, very clean for some reason. It's like the water didn't splash up into the viewfinder section, which is lucky. None of the mirror mechanism, none of the springs or anything here are particularly oxidized. So good news from my clients. Otherwise, I would probably have to, swap out the mirror and that kind of stuff at an extra cost. So far, I'm managing to pretty much not require many spares here. And the few spare parts that I am using are just because I happen to have an abundance of them at the moment. Everything else is kind of coming along fine. So I'm going to stick the little spring here. Then the viewfinder goes in like so. This one had a little red clip which went just to the side here. So I'll just use some pliers to put that back. It's just got a little plastic shim. There we go, like so. Then I need to get the big powerful spring. Reattach that. So that's the spring-loaded part. Then I'll put on the blinds. I've just put that spring on to hold everything in position at the moment. So now we can remove that spring, and the next thing that I can do is get the top housing on. Now I'm just going to clean up the base of that a little bit just to make sure it's 100% clean. And I'm going to apply a little bit of plastic grease using a brush just on the two sliding parts where the viewfinder curved mirror sits in the little tracks. So I'm just going to lubricate it just so that it's as smooth as possible. You don't have to lubricate that with that top panel off. You can sneak the brush in from the side, but since it's off, I'll just do it then. Next thing that we need to do is just reassemble the legs onto the viewfinder. So this is the viewfinder glass. It has a spring-loaded piece, and now the most fiddly part, putting it all back together again. Let's see if I can do this without having to rely on any, what's the word I'm looking for here? Rely on any like clasps or ways of securing it. Let's see if I can do this purely just with my fingers. Just giving this little bit of clean as well. Okay. Alright. Easy. This is fiddly. I'm seeing if I can just do it using my fingers. There are ways to make it slightly easier if you're having difficulty, but I think I've got it. I'm just gonna bend the pin a little bit. Okay, and then the other side doesn't really need bending. Okay, in goes the viewfinder pins. Secure them from side to side, and now we can fit the blind in place, and there we go. One fully assembled viewfinder. I will clean up some of these blinds with a bit of shellite just so that there are no marks, but that overall is looking very nice. Now I can basically start reassembling things. But I will wait for the mirror silicon to dry before I do that. So that means I'm going to go work on some other cameras in the meantime, and I will magically cut back once I am ready to start assembly. Alright, it is a few days later, and it is time to reassemble this thing. Everything is basically ready to go. I was showing someone on a forum the other day just what I was doing and just how bad a condition the camera was in. And they asked if I was going to repaint this side part here of the gear train, because as you can see I've painted the base of it matte black to prevent oxidization. And that's a good question. The answer is that I don't have to. This side panel here on this particular camera is made out of a different metal alloy to the bottom panel. And as a result, it hasn't really rusted. So we don't need to worry about that so much. I have oiled this and sanded back some of the corrosion, but this is more like an aluminium. Provided that this stays dry, this shouldn't really get any worse. It's mainly the iron bottom, the steel panels that I worry about the most. The inside metal I have oiled. I haven't painted that because, well, you're going to be inserting packs of film in there all the time, and I don't want that paint sort of sloughing off and getting into the mirror assembly, so I'm kind of limited in terms of what we can do. As I've said a few times now, the brief of this was to try and restore this thing as good as possible while not turning this into a complete ship of Theseus. That is to say, you know, if I swap the chassis and swap the body panels and swap all the parts that are damaged, have I really refurbished the camera? Well, probably not. But provided that the client, you know, doesn't go and store this thing in moist environments, it's going to be fine. So what I'm going to do is just clean the Fresnel and mirror assembly, and we're going to reinstall it. There's some salt water on here, which I just want to remove. Fortunately, all of the optical assembly in this camera has managed to miraculously escape unscathed. Quite surprising, really, just given the sorry state that it was in. I would have expected for sure oxidization of the internals of the Fresnel, of the mirror, but fortunately it's escaped unharmed, which is really great for us. Alright, just a few more little points. I'm just doing this off to the side where I've got the most light possible. I do apologize if it doesn't make particularly entertaining footage. We're also having very strange weather in the workshop at the moment. Very, very odd. It has absolutely poured down with rain. Not for very long, but really heavy drops, to the point where I genuinely thought that we were dealing with hail. But no, it's just regular old rain. It's just massive, heavy drops that fall for about 10 minutes, and then they stop. And then they might come back about half an hour later and do the same thing again. I've never quite experienced weather like that before here in Western Australia. It is truly bizarre. So if it starts to get too loud, because I am under a tin roof here, I will cease what I'm doing and I'll turn this into a bit of a musical montage. Now, I'm just going to grab my little baggie of spare parts. And we're going to put the axles back on the Fresnel. Okay. And I'm going to grab my pliers and put on the Fresnel springs. There we go. And then I'm going to clean the top of the Fresnel, and really then we can start proper reassembly. Hear that rain starting now. Great. And then once I've closed up the Fresnel, I will put the ribbon cable back on. Well, there's that hail I was talking about. Forgive me while I make a montage.
When we put all that together, the camera that we will be giving not only the United States, but the whole world, And a few years from now, when this plant is operating, cannot be measured in value by dollars. $200 or $300 or $500 could not a few years ago have bought, cannot even today, buy what will be in that camera. And yet...
Alright, the hail has stopped once more, and I am going to reattach the ribbon cable. Now, the client has not opted for any I-type conversion, so the ribbon cable is going to go on effectively identical to how it came off the camera, with no changes whatsoever. So that means I'm simply just going to resolder things. Just going to pin down the door switch. Just doing the switches one at a time. So I'm doing the battery terminals now. I'm just going to do that with a pack of film inside just to keep them held down. Here we go. Just gave me something to press against when soldering them back on. Here we are. Okay. Now we can put the RAM switches on. I will solder the front switch on, even though we don't actually have to. This switch completely gets ignored, but I will just leave it in place. And then I'll put in the hinge switches. Which I would normally bridge for the polar volt. And the film counter, which is going to be completely ignored now. Again, because of the new SX-70 RPCB, I'm just going to solder one of them, just to hold that piece of ribbon in place. Battery terminals, all switches along the side, and the only thing to do now is fit the new motor. So I have a brand new 20,000 RPM motor here. As you guys know, the original motor that was in this camera was completely toast, completely oxidized. Could it be refurbished? Yes, but I just wouldn't bother in this case. It would only be a matter of time before that oxidization came back. Motors, when they go that bad, they're just beyond salvaging. I probably could have got it working for about a week or so, but it would have failed. So I have some new rubber bushings that I have poached from a spare parts 1972 SX-70 Model 1. I have put a little piece of 6mm hose as an adapter, and that means that we can now put the new washer on the 20,000 RPM motor. I have modified the drive spring already, and now it should just be a case of clipping everything in place. I'll get my special screwdriver. Now I just have to attach the drive shaft here, which is pretty fiddly, so come on, can I get it first time? Hey, there we go. Wow, that was like the least fussy drive shaft I've installed in a long time. And if you guys want to see more about these motors, I have a whole video dedicated to them. But basically, from the factory, although they fit really well, they fit in terms of the space, they do not fit very well in terms of the fitting, and so you need to adapt wires onto them to make them fit. And so that is what I'm doing right now. I'm just routing some of the wires so that I can cut them down to size and solder them in place. That's one. And that is two. Okay. Now I just have to prep the ends. Come on. Here we go. Okay, and I am just going to insulate the metal body of the motor. I like to double insulate just so that nothing can arc across the actual shell of the motor as well. So I'm just sticking some Kapton tape right there. And now just bringing those around, holding them in place. Now we can just solder those little attachments on. So I'm just getting some tweezers here to hold it in position. Attaching the new motors is a little bit fiddly, or a little bit more fiddly than the old ones, but well and truly worth it for the performance upgrade. And again, I'm going to come just insulate the bit where the motor attaches, just as some double protection. Now I should be able to put a film door on now. There's that hail again. And we should be able to test the motor. Now, the one thing I don't know if it functions is that driver chip back here. I did resolder all the legs, just in case there was any issues there. I don't know if that driver chip has blown up due to the water damage. So we are about to find out in real time for the first time. So, just doing a bit of CPR on the rear hinge switch there. I have cleaned it up in between takes. I'm actually quite nervous for this. It might be dead. Yeah, that very well could be dead, guys. Let me just make sure that my switches are making continuity. So I'm just going to grab a multimeter. Okay. That's good. Okay. If I erect the body, how about those hinge switches? Okay. And how about the door switch? Alright, well, we might have a dead driver chip, guys, which is going to be very frustrating if that is the case. I will just check once more. And let's make sure that this pack has charge. Maybe it's flat, we don't know. Ooh, yeah, 6.1 volts. Okay. It's not looking good for that chip, guys. I may have to go and swap it. Oh, there we go. Now what was going on? Why did this pack work and the other one didn't? Perhaps the battery was bent a little far upwards. Regardless, that now functions now. Yeah, I don't understand that at all. Hang on, was this the one I used? Was there just some oxidization? Yeah, look at that. Well, that's weird. Okay. My guess is that those battery terminals need to be like bent up. Perhaps in all the sanding and prep, they have lost a bit of their shape. But that should certainly be working on all packs. So I'll probably just take the screen off and reassemble them. So I'll be right back. I'm literally just going to open that up and lift the legs up. Alright, that was easy enough. Clearly what had happened is that while I had to sand down the battery terminals, the force of sanding likely just pushed them a little flat, and so they weren't coming up and touching the bottom of the battery pack. So I've gone in there, lifted them up. I also soldered over the top of the two terminals just to give them a bit of extra height, just in case throughout this entire process they became a little deformed, but they are making excellent contact now, and we have great performance from the motor. So I'm very happy with that. The next step is to put the viewfinder back on, and then effectively we've completed the body of this camera. I tested off camera with a multimeter all the switches. They are working as they should, so I am happy that this body will work now. Doesn't matter what shutter you're going to put on it. And that means that the next thing I'm going to have to do is tackle the shutter. It is currently just about in as many pieces as you can ever make a shutter like that. The sonar assembly I have checked, and there really is no issues in terms of the gearing mechanism. Everything is moving freely, so I'm very happy with its performance. I don't know whether it works though. There is a chance that it is completely dead, and I won't know until I reassemble the thing. So that is going to be my next challenge, to figure out, can I in fact get it to work again. I have cleaned the lens cell. I've removed all salt water that was previously in there. As you can see, I have had to sort of remelt the glass back onto the lens using my soldering iron. Unfortunately, when you get debris inside a late model SX-70 lens, such as the Alpha or Sonar series cameras where the housing is completely made of black plastic, there unfortunately is no way to clean inside that rear element other than to cut it open. Unfortunately, that's just what you have to do. So that is what I did. What I'm going to do is just carve a little bit of plastic out here on the side of the where the electric eye sits. That is because I'm going to be installing a new SX-70R PCB, and because the electric eye is front mounted on the PCB, it does need a little notch carved out of it to fit the best. So I'm going to just do that now, just very carefully, just using the sharp blade. Doesn't have to be a lot. We're just looking to make a little ramp. There we go. Just like so. So I've just carved a little 45-degree ramp onto the side of the plastic, just so that the eye fits a little bit better. The next thing I'm going to need is my spare parts. So we need to reinstall the solenoid number 2, which survived. I have tested it and confirmed that it does indeed function. I'm going to use a little brass nut here to recapture it. There we go. I like to just use pliers to get the nut started. There we go. Great. Now we can put the new PCB in place. And then once I've done that, I will focus on the shutter mechanism at the front. So I'm just lining up all the pins, making sure that they go through. And I'm going to solder those pins in place. That's one. I am very hopeful that this sonar mechanism works. Like I said, it seems that being on the top of the camera, it didn't take much of the blast from the water. And it doesn't look like any salt water got onto the electronics there. Like there's no crusty residue or anything that I can see. And so hopefully I'll be able to just install it and it will work fine. That is what I'm really praying for. Just going to clean up the shutter blades a bit with some alcohol before I put them in. I have already cleaned them up with acetone the other day, but I will just absolutely make sure. As I said earlier in the video, the solenoid, the main solenoid for the shutter, also appears to be fine. It feels, at least in my fingers, like everything is operational, and I have taken it apart, cleaned it, and flushed it. And I'm confident that it will actually work. If it doesn't, well, we can always swap it out for another. But I am hopeful that it won't have to come to that. So I'm just going to install a blade in backwards here. Just make sure this is as clean as I can get it. I'm trying to do this with like my head as far away from the camera as possible. So as to not obscure your vision. Usually I'd be like right over the thing right now. So I always find repairs like this so much harder to do on video. Sorry, my camera ran out of battery there. and 2. All right. Now I'll put in the main solenoid. Oh, first I will put in the little arm. The beam that connects the two together. Much better. All right, time to put the solenoid in. Cool. Just going to grab a square-headed screw and a little washer. And let's screw the solenoid in. Now, basically, you'll notice that the solenoid has 2 springs. It's got the main spring and then a smaller spring. When the solenoid piston, when it starts to touch the small spring, you want it to make a very small little hole with the aperture shape. Kind of like so. Can you guys see that? Like about that size. That's when you know it's pretty much at factory position. Now you may need to adjust it left and right when it comes to calibrating the solenoid of the SX-70 RPCB. But that should be rough enough in terms of the solenoid position for it to be able to be calibrated. I may have to shift it around. I'm not entirely sure yet. I mean, this entire shutter might end up being donated. If I can't get the autofocus assembly to work, I might have to convert it to take a Model 1 or a Model 2 shutter instead. I just simply don't know if I'll be able to get this thing operating as a sonar until I test everything. So I'm going to put the ribbon cable on, and then I guess we can put the autofocus assembly on, put it on the body of the camera, and give it a test. Great. All right, let's give this thing a bit of a run. I won't put the lens in or calibrate it or anything like that just yet. I really just want to see, does this thing even fire up? Like, will this thing be even like close to remotely resembling operating Okay. I'm just soldering the sonar ribbon cable now to the PCB. Again, man, it's so much harder to solder when I'm trying to do this on camera. Nearly done. I'm just trying to be as neat as possible. Cool. All right. I think it's time to test this thing and give it a little bit of a dry run. I would be looking to see whether or not the autofocus assembly turns. I want to see that the motor works, and I want to hear that depending on where I put my hand above the transducer, that the motor runs for different lengths of time. If it can do that, then I'm going to be very satisfied that this thing will be fully operational. So I am going to just insulate the back of this PCB. Actually, do you know what? I'll do that in a minute. I'm itching to test this. Alright, I'm just going to loosely hold this thing in place with a single screw. I'm going to attach the ribbon cable, again, just fairly messily to start off with. And I just want a rough idea, does this thing work? Because if it doesn't, it's going to be very annoying. But the thing is, I don't know what is alive and what's not on this camera. I was unable to test anything because the body was in such dire condition. In fact, everything was in such dire condition that it wasn't going to be able to work without being fully torn down and overhauled anyway. So really, this is the first time I'm testing some of the crucial parts. Alright, I'm going to neaten those up in a minute. I'm just after a rough test. Please work. Alright, I think we have life, guys. Alright, it sounds like it's focusing properly. I'm not going to know unless I put all the rest of the pieces on it. But I'm very happy with how this is turning out so far. If the autofocus assembly on this truly did survive all of that seawater, then that will be in and of itself some small miracle. And I will be absolutely astonished if that is the case. I will also be astonished if I don't have to replace the opto sensor, because my client, the same one that has given me this, has also given me, they gave me two other cameras, including an SLR 680, and on that one, which was also in terrible condition, the opto sensor had died, and I needed to completely rebuild the whole thing. So if this camera has somehow managed to defy killing the opto sensor while the 680 was dead on arrival, then that will be really something. So I'm going to hold the sonar assembly in place with a single screw. I'm putting the screw on the left-hand side so that I can still lift it and tilt it to disengage the idler gears from the main lens. I'm going to give the lens a final clean before reassembly. And yeah, then I can put on the cam follower assembly, which I've got sitting somewhere to my side. Here it is. I knew I put that somewhere. I can put on the light dark wheel and the walking arm and give this thing a test. Alright, putting in a new scrivet because remember one of them had completely rusted into oblivion. So that does need to come from the old spare parts. I have serviced the cam follower as best as I can. Oh. That said, it does seem to have gummed up. Guys, I don't think this is gonna cut it. It's too far gone. Alright, we have a true casualty. This cam follower assembly has rusted to the point where I just don't think it's going to be reliable. After a bit of freeing up, it's okay. But I'm not entirely sure we can rely on this, guys. Alright, let's put the cam follower on. Get the little flap hooked over solenoid number 2. Get my greased brush and just apply a very thin bit of lube to the top there. And now I just need to find a washer. Ah, there it is. I knew I'd put it somewhere. Alright, same story. Gonna grab the greased brush and I'm just gonna grease the rear channel. And put on a hex head nut. I'm just making sure that this is lined up nicely. So setting it from park to true infinity and just making sure that the wheel lines up to where it's supposed to be. Now it's going to come over. Probably to about there. Again, set it to park. Nearly there, one tooth off. Again, set it to park. Check. Perfect. All right. Got a huge big greasy thumbprint on the front of that lens, which I will just clean off. Alright, let's give this a test, and then I'm going to give this thing a clean and an assemble. Does the autofocus work? Unbelievable. Well guys, that is pretty much as perfect as I can get it. I think I will have to retime. Oh no, I know what's going on. I know what's going on. The door switch here is not engaging properly, so it's not making that click. So I'm just going to alter that a bit. We'll try it again. There we go. All right. I am going to reassemble this thing and we can admire the finished results. All right, fully assembled and ready to go. I really wanted to put new leather on this, but unfortunately my client has a blue leather waiting for them at home that they are going to install. In the future, if you send me a camera to be repaired, I can, if you send it to me without leather on it, I can happily install whatever color of leather it is that you want. A lot of my clients, if they want something custom that I don't have in stock, just either have it shipped directly to me or include it in the box with the camera. So that does mean that you guys won't see this 100% finished, but this thing works really, really well. Considering the absolute non-functioning condition that it arrived to me in, this was something, you know, almost miraculous to be able to bring this thing back to life and to do so with it looking so clean. By the time that this thing is reskinned, no one is ever going to be able to tell that it was basically dropped in the ocean. And I hope that it goes on to take many wonderful photos for my client for years to come. whether it be manual control, automatic, SX-70, 600 mode. The SX-70 sonar with its SX-70R PCB is going to be able to do the lot. And that is basically where I want to end the video today. It's approaching the end of the year. I don't know how many of these videos I'm going to be able to get out between now and Christmas, purely because my life is getting very busy at the moment. Not only am I trying to finish all of my clients' orders for the year, but I also have a child on the way, which could be due realistically any time from now until the new year. There's not exactly a guaranteed date on these things. And so, yeah, that means that I'm going to be trying as hard as possible to work on client repairs as I possibly can. So I don't know how many videos I'm going to be putting out between now and the new year. So I just wanted to say, if I don't end up posting much, that I wanted to thank everyone who has liked and subscribed. I hit 6,000 subs just the other day, which is absolutely wild. I would love to get myself to 10, so please feel free to like and subscribe if you haven't already. And feel free to leave a donation in the links below if you found any of this video helpful. Little donations like that help me keep the lights on as an independent technician. This is my full-time job, and I can't make the videos without you guys sending me cameras and donations and things like that in order to keep me employed. So I wanted to say thank you for everyone who's been a client or a patron of mine, and just say that I will see you in the next video. I hope you all have a wonderful end of the year if you are watching at this time, and yeah, I'll see you next time.